My name is Aya Nicole Cook. I'm the owner and wellness curator here at Haji Hilton Salon, and it is my supreme honor to welcome Empress Karen Rose. Empress Karen really needs no introduction, and that's not what I'm here to do anyway. But just wanted to say that I have had the opportunity to study with Karen. And the training that I had with her really allowed me to develop the confidence that I needed to begin sharing the magic of plant medicine with my community here. And I'm so grateful for that. I'm so grateful for the way that she holds space and for the way that she role models what it is to stand in your power and to be masterful in all that you do. So deep bow to you, Empress Karen. Thank you so much for allowing us to hold this space for you this evening. I'm also super grateful to Julie from the Center for Black Diaspora in DePaul University and to her whole team who worked so hard to pull all of this together. And it's so profound that you saw this space, Julie, that you know me, and you decided to bring this event out of DePaul for the community to experience it. So thank you, good people. Thank you for showing up and for helping us to welcome Karen to Chicago and to Haji. You are in for even more treats. I know the food was already delicious, right? Yes. So now the main course. Very much. Yes, no, I have to, I know you're here for our esteemed guests, but I do want to do a few acknowledgements. So I want to thank you all here who are in person. I'm Julie Freeman, and I'm the director from the Center for Black Diaspora at DePaul University. I want to thank those of you who are online and those of you who are here. People that I need to acknowledge is Aya. She's gone. I want to thank her so much. We were both trained by Karen Rose as spiritual herbalists, and so I'm so happy to be working as two of my colleagues up there looking at her. Charles, can you get them? So I want them here because they are some of the people I want to acknowledge. So you know, DePaul University is well known for working in the community, but a lot of times when we have events, the community comes to DePaul, and we wanted to kind of get out to the walls of academia and bring it into the community. And luckily, I had Aya who made this possible. This event is also possible in part by a grant from the Healing Illinois Initiative of the Illinois Department of Human Services in partnership with the Healing Foundation Illinois. And so I want to acknowledge my colleagues, Dr. Maria Ferreira, Dr. Ann Russo when she comes in, when she climbs the door, Dr. Susana Martinez for our work on this grant, and also for our 5-year collaborative work on the Healing Justice Dialogue series. I want to thank some of our co-organizers for this event. Again, the Center for Black Diaspora, the Center for Community Health Equity and Rush University, the Women's Center, Peace, Justice, and Conflict Studies, they're all at DePaul. The Monsignor John J. Egan Office of Urban Education and Community Partnership, and the Division of Mission and Ministry at DePaul University. Thanks also to Jennifer Gardner, the Assistant Director of the Center for Black Diaspora, did a lot of things. Christine Daniels, the Administrative Assistant for the Center for Community Health Equity. Maya Jefferson, the Center's Content Development Assistant, who will probably be taking photographs. They have all made this event possible. I want to ask a few housekeeping business. We'd like to ask all of you attending in person. So if it's in person, you'll see in the seat this scan code. Because of the grant we got to the Healing Illinois Initiative, we'd love after this event for you to fill out the call for us. For those of you online, a link will be dropped in the Zoom for you. Could you please fill this out for us? And then also you will see There should be, I don't know where mine is, but there are little index cards. We put those there so that you can take notes and have your questions ready for when you're done, because I know you're waiting for that. All right, so feel free to do that. Again, thanks to Aya, and thanks so much to Karen Rose. I know that Karen Rose does not want me to read her bio, but I would just like to quickly acknowledge some stuff about her. So I am pleased to introduce our featured guest, Karen M. Rose, who trained both Aya and myself. Thank you for being here with us. Such a pleasure. Trained in Eastern and Western herbal medicine, master herbalist, Karen M. Rose is the owner of Sacred Vibes Healing and Sacred Vibes Apothecary. Her inspiration for this work began as a child in her native home of Esequibo, Guyana, where she was exposed to how African, Caribbean, and Latin American traditions profoundly influenced plant medicine and community healing. The legacy of these lands is the foundation of Karen Rose's spiritual and healing practice. A strong advocate of community partnership and healing, she believes that all spiritual traditions offer guidance on the path to finding truth, and she has authored articles on the power and simplicity of herbs used to heal and nourish mind, body, and spirit. I saw a lot of you walk in with her book, The Art and Practice of Spiritual Herbalism, Transform, Heal, and Remember with the Power of Plants and Ancestral Medicine. So she will be here afterwards to sign your books. Welcome. Such a pleasure.
So can you all hear me?
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, I want to take the opportunity also to acknowledge the hard work of Julie to get me here. And it really wasn't much hard work because Julie was like, you know what? I want to do this again. And I was like, yeah. But it feels really great to be here in person. I also want to thank Jennifer for being present in all the emails and also be reaching out. And Aya, thank you so much for opening up your space. The last time I visited in Haji. Last night I visited Chicago, you said, oh, I want you to have Haji. But here we are about 3 years later, and it feels really great to be here. So, and thank you all for choosing to spend this evening, Friday evening, with Beyonce in town. I'm feeling that. Yes. There's a choice. Maybe the Queen or the Empress. It could be the Queen now. Okay. So, before we get started, I first wanted to also acknowledge the energy that brought me here. I feel these days I move very much in spirit, and I move very much in spirit knowing that I'm always taken care of and protected. And so the ancestors are very present for me in meeting in this space. And I just want to acknowledge them for this entire weekend that I've been spending here, that they're the ones who are really at the back of this work and giving me enough energy, giving me enough insight, and constantly hearing their voices when I speak. So, yeah, that feels really important. And so I want to also invite your ancestors in this afternoon as we're talking, because I learned to understand that nothing is by chance, right? So you're here because you were meant to be here. And it's really beautiful to operate from that space, that you know that it's not by chance you chose Haji on this Friday evening to listen to me, that there are many things conspiring for you to be here so that you can hear the things that we're going to talk about today. And I say we because also I want to invite you into this discussion in multiple ways. I know we have some time for questions and answers, but also I was thinking about if I asked a question, if you'd be so vulnerable and also brave and courageous enough to step up and talk while we're talking. So it's a discussion. So yes, I'm Karen and I'm from Guyana. And my child, Shiloh, who is 17, reminds me all the time that I'm not Caribbean. He's like, you're South American. I'll have you. You're South American. Every time I'm like, we're Caribbean, so don't you? He's like, no, actually, you're South American. But Guyana is the only English-speaking country in South America. We were colonized by the British last, and as part of that, we became part of Caribbean. And so the Caribbean has always been our closest neighbors and our closest ally. And the capital of Caribbean is in Guyana. So, over my growing up, I've always known myself to be Caribbean. We've always referred to ourselves as Caribbean identification with West Indies. I grew up with my grandmother, and I grew up with my mom. We spent most of our time with my grandmother, as it's so common, right? For many of us who's part of the generation that I'm in, like we had grandmothers who could retire. Imagine that. And be home and be present for their grandchildren. And growing up in the country part of Guyana, it's definitely shaped a lot of who I am. Because my grandmother was a big representative of what it means to just like walk with spirit. And I didn't know that was what I was watching or what I was being trained for. I just knew that I loved the ways of my grandmother, all of the ways in which she showed up with food, in which she showed up with care and love. But the way that influences my work mostly today is the way she showed up with healing. And so you'll hear me reference Eunice Basco a lot in today's meeting. That was my grandmother's name. And there are many aspects of that she's taught me that will come forward today. I'm here to talk about what is spiritual herbalism, right? How spiritual herbalism can help artists and healers. And so the question is, what is spiritual herbalism? What is so different from just herbalism, right? And the work that I do is spiritual herbalism. So I just wanted to read you a definition that I have created over the years for spiritual herbalism, because multiple sources have said to me in the past, Karen, what is spiritual herbalism? So it is the practice of plant medicine, not only to heal our physical bodies, but our emotional bodies. We utilize plants that exist around us to heal not only ourselves, our ancestors, and the land we walk on, and our communities. Spiritual herbalism is rooted in land justice, social justice, and racial justice. We believe that our ancestral medicine and healing technologies are necessary for our healing, liberation, and survival. Healing our generations backward and forward, we recognize and revere our ancestors, our teachers, and the spirits that brought us here. And that, in a nutshell, is what spiritual herbalism is. So how does that sound for what you know of plant medicine?
It's a kofa.
Seems like getting back to the source.
So what are some words that are different than you thought of from what herbalism is or herbology or any of those things? Land justice.
Someone on Zoom says a total essence of who we are.
Absolutely.
I feel like when I hear that, it makes me think of once you connect more into plants, you understand that in healing, you understand that you cannot disconnect the spirit from the plant. So when you go into pharmaceuticals and things, it's not just you want the plant derivatives, you're really connecting to the spirit of the plant, honoring the spirit of everything around, so the spirit of nature, of air, and we're connecting to that, and that's also what's healing us.
Yes.
And when you're saying about our emotions and our ancestors, when I take I call it my concoction, create my concoctions with the herbs, I feel like it's a harmonization of my past, present, and self, and also it gives me an opportunity to commune with my ancestors.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, when I first started herbalism and I was trained in herbalism in what we call Western herbalism, it felt very Western because all of these pieces were missing. There was an emphasis on the science of herbalism, and this plant is for that, this plant is for that. And something always felt missing because that was not how I was informed about what healing looks like. And so early in my herbalism career, I knew I couldn't, it just didn't resonate with me the way practice of tell me what's wrong with you and here's the plant that's for you. What I recognize is that there's not a separation between social justice issues and healing. There's not a separation between racial justice issues and healing. Being a Black woman in this body, I recognize that to be true. And I also recognize that the part around our ancestors, people weren't even making that connection. And also our ancestral lands were really important to how we heal. These things were all mutually true, and they could not be separated from how we could heal. And so I opened my apothecary in Flatbush, Brooklyn. That was the neighborhood that I immigrated to when I was 14 years old from Guyana. And Flatbush, Brooklyn, until the last 10 years or so probably, but we're still there. It's a community. So here we go, second night in Chicago. Yeah, no problem.
It's just the end.
Yeah, exactly. It's that energy, but I'm grateful for it, and and it speaks true to what we're saying to that, right? Because I knew that where I could make change would be in the community that I grew up in. And the change that I most wanted to make was to see people connect back to their medicine. You know, and my partner is here, and I met my partner in the shop, right? In my shop. But I remember the first time my partner came in, and they were like, "I'm from Trinidad," and my first question was, "What plants did you use when you were growing up?" But it was not uncommon. That was the question that I asked everyone. What plants did you use when you were growing up? And it's so necessary for people to stop and just reflect on their own ancestral tradition and their ancestral memory. And so my partner responded, lemongrass. And I was like, yeah, what did you use it for? And they started to say like what their grandmother would use it for. And I was like, well, my grandmother used it this way. And this is not uncommon for my practice, to share information and to really help folks understand that the medicine that they have, the value of it. The value of that medicine, the value of that memory, the value of that connection, the value of that remembrance of just remembering your grandmother in that moment. And then somehow that unlocks something else, right, in the body that feels like what true healing should be reflected about. People stop and they start to tell me like stories about their grandmother, the plant, and the country that they're from. And by the time they leave, they're like, that was a really great conversation. This place feels so healing. But the conversation came from that remembrance. And so a big part of what we'll also talk about is how that can be remembered. And to me, that's what spiritual herbalism is. It is not assigning a cure to anything, because you yourself have that power to heal yourself, right? And so I cannot assign this plant to heal you. I can recommend a plant that heals conditions like what you've mentioned, but I'm wide open for any other kind of experience that you will have with this medicine, because the medicine meets you where you are and then resurrects a certain kind of memory that is so much deeper. That really is what heals. And we can talk more about what spiritual herbalism is later if you have additional questions. I'm here to talk to activists and healers, right? And so an activist is someone who activates change. And a healer is someone who makes things whole. That's what it's described as. So when I think about what does an activist and healer do, then an activist activates for wholeness. And so if we're not activating for wholeness, then we're just activists. We're not activists and healers. When you add that healer part of it, you realize that the whole reason that you're in this, as jaded as we could get, is that we're trying to make things whole. What is wholeness? What is wholeness? Wholeness.
Without, not lacking.
Not lacking. Complete.
Self-contained.
Self-contained.
That's
Self-possessed.
unbroken circle.
Unfocused, did you say?
Unbroken.
Unbroken circle.
Fulfillment.
Unified.
Worse.
Abundant.
Abundance. Abundance. Balance.
We have a deep alignment of knowing, fearlessness,
Fearlessness. Wow.
love. You're popping in on Zoom.
It's incredible to think that activists are activating for people to be self-possessed. For people to be connected to source. For wholeness. To be fearless. Most healers are activists. Most activists are healers, right? So growing up, there's so much of the language that we use now that I'm actually glad that I didn't get exposed to earlier. Right now when I hear it, and Julie knows this, because Julie's in my class and I talk about this a lot. Now when I hear it, I'm kind of like, what is that? What are you talking about? You know, and oftentimes people are like, well, what do you mean? And I'm like, there's so much specific, like, that's what you're trying, like, imagine me talking to my kid like this. He'd be like, what do you know? Like, we've gone from the place of like using language to connect to using language to disconnect and separate. So I want to talk about activist and I want to talk about healer. And what I realized that my grandmother was an activist. Now I can see that. But my grandmother didn't feel like she was doing anything that she was activating. But she was very concerned about what it meant for people to be whole. And as a result of what it meant for people to be whole, she was constantly activating all kinds of situations. And she didn't have to have a title for that. Right? So grandma spent a lot of time making sure that if your mother wasn't present, that you had a home. We have, you know, I grew up with my grandmother introducing us to people and being like, I'm taking this child in. Their mom is unable to care for them at this time. In the country. I'm taking my grandmother, people would come to my grandmother's house and say, would you take my child? I'm not able to take care of them anymore. And my grandmother was a single parent. But my grandmother was always like, yeah, absolutely. So we grew up with a lot of siblings that my grandmother just took in, right? Like to make sure that they were home. My grandmother cooked a whole lot for people who didn't have food in deep exchange. She was extremely stressed by nature. She was always sewing something for someone who lived in the village. There were a lot of people who, whether it was the village drunk, that my grandmother was like, take this to them. And my sister and I now are like, oh, the people that my grandmother used to send us with food. You know, as little ones, we'd be like, but we're so afraid, like, you know, of them. And my grandmother would be like, just take the food over there. Right? And we'd go and we'd drop the food off and we'd run back and I'd be ready to just be like, you know, just looking at us. But I think in multiple ways, she recognized what it meant for people to not have and not be connected, and she wanted to be that connection. And I more than looking at someone as if they had a loss, I think she was looking at someone like, what connection do you have? And so I believe that connection is a huge part of activism. Connection to another human being. Connection to the land, connection to our ancestors, connection to source. It's a big part of what it means to be whole. And the person that's providing that is the activist. So my healing work I try to remember the work that my grandmother did in most every situation that I'm called in for healing, right? I try to take away or strip away this separation between me and you. And that can be really radical to think of in this time, because even within our communities, there are a lot of separation, and it's purposely designed for that to be reflected back, right? But in our shop, in our apothecary, it is like once people walk in and I start to talk to them, there's something to connect to. And then part of my work is have them leaving connected to something. And it could be as simple as, so many people come in and they're like, yeah, you know, my family considers me strange. And I'm like, well, I'm the strangest one in the family, right? I feel like I'm the black sheep. We're all black sheep. Everybody in here, is black sheep. So it's like being in that space of finding community is really an important part of what it means to heal. And so we cannot heal alone or within a vacuum. And that's one of the values of sacred, is being able to say that no one needs to heal alone or in a vacuum. There's a community that exists, that part of your healing is really tied up with that community. And what does it mean to have our healing tied up with a community? And this is something I teach in my herbalism program. Oftentimes, when you're holding an imbalance, it is often referred to as you have diabetes, or you have, I don't know, cancer, prevalent issues.
Or cis.
And what we do is we take away the framework of what it means to hold something on by yourself. Because the reason that you have diabetes is not just yours, but it could be an imbalance that's in your family. Mm-hmm. Bigger than that, it could be an imbalance that's in the community. Because we all know that the food sources or the food deserts that were created in our community, that's why so many members of our community have because of lack of access to healthy foods, are diabetic. Mm-hmm. So it's really not the individual who's holding this by themselves. It's a reflection on the community and all the ways that community is impacted. So what if we started to look at the person who has that illness as the messenger? What if we started to look at that person's body is sending us a message about how imbalanced we are as a family, or imbalanced we are as a community, imbalanced we are as a greater community, and imbalanced we are as a global community, imbalanced we are spiritually. Mm-hmm. Like what's really going on, right? And so if looking at it in that way, then we begin to take responsibility well beyond what's affecting that person and start really looking at why are the numbers so high? What is this reflective of, right? And then we have to answer some more difficult questions that I think many of us are not prepared to answer, right? And so it's easier to be like, well, you just get some treatment for that. You take care of what you have going on here with any responsibility. So for me, when I'm seeing folks walk into my apothecary, and in New York, and no one could sleep, like sleep. Sleep is the thing that causes most people to walk into the apothecary. Sleep, stress, high blood pressure, and issues related to stress is like really high. And so it makes me think of like, yeah, loss of housing, right? Like single parent households, lack of access for children, like so many things that compounds what's happening in our body or comes together to create this wave of illness. So when I'm working with someone, it's great to be able to say, well, like, here's some tea, here's some plants that could really support you. But beyond that, what else is happening? Like, what else could happen in your world? So we use a lot of resources also for recommendations for our clients. But I think one of the biggest recommendations that we do is ask people to connect to themselves and really start listening to their bodies. I ask people what wellness can feel like for them. And it's amazing to me how many people don't know what wellness is because they haven't been well, right? Some people are like, I don't even remember the last time I've been well. Most people, and some. And in those moments, we get to like sit and think about what wellness could look like. Okay, so what's your dream then? If this has not been something that you remember, what is your dream for you to be well? What does wellness look like and feel like, not only in your body, but in your world? And hold that picture in your mind as you are healing. And this is where plant medicine really enters the conversation, because there's so many beautiful allies that we have. And I call plant our allies because it's developing a relationship with plant, right? So I can talk to you, and the way we develop a relationship with plant is the example that I gave you earlier about lemongrass. What is a plant that you remember from your childhood? That's a good question.
Honeysuckle,
Honeysuckle.
dandelion,
Peppermint. I saw so much dandelion. Say it again. Lilacs. Rose. Oregano.
Marigold.
What did you say?
Marigold.
Marigold. Yeah. Mint. And that's how we build a relationship. Just starting there. It's like remembering a friend. It's like remembering your friend that you had in second grade, right? Like, oh yeah, I remember you. I kind of remember how we used to talk or how we used to use you, but I want to get to know more. And this is a relationship. So it's not just me using you, it's the two of us now, right? So it's also like, what could you bring to me, Mint? What's your conversation that you want to have with me, Rose? Lilac, I remember your smell. What does your smell like again? What does that mean? Like when I smell you, what's the message in your scent? Simple, it's a conversation. I talk about the ancestors so much with plants because they're closely intertwined. The way we remember our ancestors is the same way we remember plants. So many people will say to me, like, Karen, how do I connect to my ancestors? And I say, it's really easy. It's just like you're connecting to this plant medicine that's in front of you. Connecting with your ancestors by remembering, oh, my grandma used to drink this. My grandmother grew this. I remember seeing this at my grandma's house. Or that, I always talk about that weird aunt that everybody has in their family. That's like, oh, I had a weird aunt that had all the remedies in her kitchen, used to look crazy, but that's the person who has all the plant medicine, right? So it's like, what is that? What do you remember from that weird aunt's medicine? Or some of us in here are weird aunt, right? But you know, and that's it. Like, what memory are you creating for people who come to your home? Like, what are you showing up for your the generation to come, your descendants? What is that you're showing up for your descendants? Like to know and to understand. And so sometimes it's just when we were remembering our ancestors, remembering that thing, that one thing that could connect you back to them. And through that, a larger conversation begins. A deeper and a larger conversation begins. Like, how did she use this? Why would she use this? Oh, she used it to treat this. Oh, I didn't even know that was a thing for this family. I didn't even know that showed up in this family. I wonder how many other people had that. And now I'm feeling the same way too. Like, am I carrying that hereditary contract too? Like, what's going on, right? Like, so we start to investigate and we literally go down this rabbit hole. So welcome to Wonderland, right? It's really a beautiful place where we can like look at it that way. We like step in and then before we know it, like it just draws in. Our ancestors are just waiting for us to like step forward and then we get drawn all the way in. Plants are the same.
Because the plant will come to you and then you start using rose and all of a sudden the rose is like, go pick that dandelion. And then you get the dandelion and then they're like, well, how about some oregano? And before you know it, you're now engaged with multiple plants. And so when Julie asked me to talk about like, what plants can you use in your work to support some of the things that come up? I started to think like, what are some of the things that I want to hear from you? But I think the biggest thing that I think about or imbalance that could come up is, or the strength that we need is an absolute necessity to create. I think we get into this space of activism where it feels like we've been doing the same thing forever. And it could very well feel that way because of the day-to-day things that you are. But what does it look like to be truly creative and to understand like the time that we're in this moment? And what does it feel like to truly understand the time that you're in and create from that time? And I think that plants help a ton here. Plants help us to be creative problem solvers of the time. They help us to remember. You know, I think about the trees, and there's so many trees that I teach, and they're 1,000-year-old trees, like oak. Something oak in Prospect Park has been there forever, since Brooklyn was a farmland, hundreds and hundreds of years, right? And so when I talk about oak, I'm like the memories that you must have, and the things that you must have seen, and that's stored. Stored memories in this tree. And so for me to access, for me to utilize your medicine is you sharing that with my DNA. You're like bringing me memories from the past, but you're also showing me how to survive now, because you're still here. And what does it take to survive like that? And so when we engage with plant medicine, it's, I say to my students that plants don't lower their vibration to talk to you or to exchange, but we have to reach their frequency in order to understand them. And oftentimes that looks like putting some things down in order to reach that frequency. It looks like putting some people down in order to reach that frequency. So if we're engaging with plant medicine, what you're going to notice is that your frequency is changing, and that your circles are changing, and that the language that you use is changing. And it can be scary. It can be like, oh, I'm not ready for this plant, you know? So I think one of my favorite plants when I talk about it in this way, and also I think that dreaming is a big part of our creativity, right? And when we dream, we not only dream for now, we're dreaming for the future. There's so many times that I dream and I'm like, this isn't for now. Like if we think about the work of Octavia Butler,
Yes.
that's dreaming for the future.
Yes.
Right? And so much of the path that we leave, or so much of the map, like we're cartographers, like we're carving a map right now that our descendants are going to need to follow. And as our descendants follow that map comes from our dreams. And so plants that encourage you to dream, a lot of weeds, plants that we throw away, and plants that we wouldn't even think of, encourage dreaming. And many of you, if you have my book, I talk about mugwort, but even beyond that, you may know of mugwort on your own. And mugwort isn't the only plant that encourages to dream, but I want to talk about mugwort because I feel like for such a long, you know, as weeds, we kind of write weeds off. And I would go to community gardens and I'd be like, when you're weeding, could you you do those things that you don't want? Like I'm gonna take the weeds from you because I realize how potent the medicine of weeds or things that we put to the side are. I also want to talk about this in our lineage, right? The potency of mugwort is as equal or deeply connected to the people that we've put aside in our lineage. The people that we've started to forget, the ancestors that we didn't think that were important, the ancestors that existed in our lineage, that for some reason we're like, oh, that was difficult. That's not someone I want to connect with. My parents are not friends with them. My grandparents are not friends. And those people have a ton of medicine. That's what weeds are. They hold a memory that's specific to radical revolution. And so when we work with a plant like mugwort, or even if we work with a plant like nettles, we're also understanding what it means to like radically grow and radically take over and feel cast aside without looking at the medicine of us. And so mugwort is so beautiful as a dream aid for us to begin to future, like dream our future, begin to look and see what our future could look like, feel like, and create amazing plans for it. I think that's necessary.
Yeah.
The next part that I want to talk about is this bird out. And there's a lot that I want to say. It's hard saying all kinds of things right now, but I think I'm going to go in the direction of I recognize that exhaustion comes with the territory. And sometimes the fire in us gets depleted. And when the fire gets depleted, plants desist returning fire to us. But I also want you to know that your fire is for you. Because we tend to think of the fire, we tend to give away our fire. But the only fire that you somehow seem like people hold you accountable for is your anger. And that you claim as your own. But every other fire, you feel like it's here for you to share and to give away. And you feel really bad when you like give away the fire of anger. And so you're like, my anger. I wish I can control my anger. But you never think about, like, I wish I could control my creative fire. I wish I can control giving so much away of my sexual fire. That is a big part of your creative fire. Your digestive fire, the fire of your heart. Those are the things we kind of like just give away without even thinking about. And I'm hearing tonight, like, we just gotta know, like, how much we need for ourselves before we can start like offering it to everybody else. So now that you might be like, oh, my fire is depleted, I'm feeling kind of burnt out. And I'm going to talk to you about regaining that fire. You're not regaining it so that you could gift it again. Right? I'm talking about regaining it and holding it. Because you're going to need it. You're going to need it. And one of my favorite herbs for building that fire is nettles. Nettles is ruled by Mars, fiery planet. Mars fire, that's its elemental rule. Super fire in its nature. But nettle doesn't impact you as a fiery plant. It doesn't impact you like ginger. It doesn't impact you like cayenne. It doesn't impact you like garlic. These are all plants that are also ruled by Mars and fire. Nettles have a different way of building your fire. And the way nettles build your fire is called nourishment. Nourishment. It nourishes you deeply so that you have a capacity to hold fire. It is rich in, it's like a multivitamin. It's rich in vitamins from vitamin A all the way through K. So if you're exhausted, nettle is an ally that you can spend time with. You can lean on nettles until you start to feel energetic again or energized again. But remember, this is also about holding on to some of that. I've talked about creativity and burnout. What are other things that come up for you as an activist?
Feeling like the people who are able to hear what I have to say, I'm listening.
A lot of people wanting to hear what you have to say.
Me wanting to share what I have to say with the people that I know need to hear, but they don't hear.
So what would you say that is, that they don't hear it because you don't have them as an audience, or they don't hear it because they can't see themselves in it?
Maybe because they don't see themselves in it, particularly talking about them. And want to text to educate them about herbal medicine. Yeah. It's very resistant for most of them. So I would say it's older.
The older ones are most resistant. Yeah, yeah. I think, you know, all of our training for everything that we're gonna do in our life comes from our family. Because like, if they teach us about what it is not to listen, so yeah. One of the things I say about family and herbal medicine in general, I say I'm not an herbal evangelist. Like, I'm not here to preach to people about taking herbal medicine. I am not here to tell you why you should make this choice over your life. You know, like this stands between you and your survival. Those things are not what my work is about. My work, and I'm plenty busy meeting the people that are already there. So it's not pulling anyone along. It's kind of like, you were looking for me, I was looking for you too. And so that sense of that energy, you know, I have people who come into my shop and they're like, they're needing a medicine, but they're like, well, why should I be getting it? Or tell me why I should be taking it. And I'm like, tell me why you think you should take it. I mean, I've never entered this work like I have something that I need to prove to you that makes this work work. You know, and I find that particularly with my family, I tell them what I do. I tell them what are some of the things that are helpful, and I leave them to ask for it. Because what I encounter is a readiness when someone asks, right? And so if you've known for 9 years that I have sleep tea and you can't sleep, but you know I have sleep tea, right? And you have never asked me for it, that means that if I gave you sleep tea, you're probably not gonna use it, right? But the moment that you say, Karen, you know, I can't sleep, do you have sleep tea? I'm like, oh, well, yeah, I can get that to you like tomorrow, you know? Because now I know that you're ready and you're going to actually utilize the tea, right? And so it's, I want people to be so engaged in their own healing that it's conversation, that we're now just talking, and it's not a one-sided, all the reasons why you should take this. Another thing that I think is really beneficial is leading by example. So if your family is around you and you're constantly drinking your nettle tea, someone's gonna say like, what are you drinking that for? And in that moment, you kind of create the opening to be like, well, I'm drinking this because I'm burnt out and it's helping me feel better. And they may say, you have some more, and that would work, right? So it's that exchange that with the elders that I wait for.
Yeah.
But another great way of talking to our elders about plant medicine is to say, what did your family do? And if they start to like give you answers, it opens up something, you know, and that's how I have, my grandmother taught me about plants. My mom doesn't use a whole lot of plant medicine. So I'm always, you know, she always says, it skips a generation, it skipped me. And I'm like, actually it didn't, Mom. Because then when my mom starts to tell me a story, like the story of my birth, she remembers all the herbs that was used to deliver this 13-pound baby at home. So she is always like, you know, I delivered you at home and it helped me. this herb helped me, and they brought this to be the next day to wash in, and they so, so I was like, look at all those herbal medicines, that you've been using. So I try to like recall her energy through her own experiences, from her own stories, like call these plants back to her.
As you said, and what comes up for us as an activist, sometimes like somatic symptoms, so like a lot of like the throat, pulsating, I feel like the back, like almost as if I'm getting off a noose. So like when, like the pain of my ancestors running so viscerally through me as I'm speaking up against the current oppression that I'm experiencing.
Yeah, and you don't always have to feel that pain of your ancestor. Like, we think that memory or ancestral reverence or ancestor honoring is also to feel the ancestral pain. It is not. No ancestor, and I'm telling you this before I am an ancestor, because I know when I become an ancestor, I'm not going to want to see my daughter in pain.
Yeah.
Right? So no ancestor wants you to feel their pain. What's visceral is the emotion that's attached to the memory that you're still holding on to. So how can we work with that emotion that's attached to the memory that feels painful, that's creating a physical reaction in you? And so there are many times that if there's a particular ancestor, you can certainly work with that ancestor to say like, hey, I am feeling this memory. Is there an offering that I can make to you to help ease that? And it can be simple as give them water. Give them water. Like if you're feeling that around your throat, around your neck, like I would say, leave them water. Send a prayer to them. Help them to understand that you are safe. That you're safe.
So activism and being burned out. I feel like the next component is consistency. Consistent, working with the community, going through, breaking the earth down, putting the properties and things like that, letting them know that this is the next step. Because herbalism and being consistent ties in together, and that's very difficult to give them being the activists and tell them have to be consistent in order to get the healing. Also, I'm an example, but being consistent is like that's the thing that turns them from going deeper into their journey with the earth to heal them, because I tell them certain things they have to cut out, like detoxify their body. Can't drink the alcohol right now. They don't want to do that. So I feel like, that being burned out comes to this. I feel like showing how it gets me burned out because I'm constantly having to keep myself. I'm now burned out because I'm getting the game and I'm leaving people to take. Yeah, I gave you game. Now it's up to you to take your time to keep running, but sometimes it don't.
So it's their consistency that's burning you out, not your consistency. And so
myself.
Right. And I mean, and that's what we're here for, is to be consistent with ourselves. We can't be consistent with someone else. And there's so much that I want to say. How much time do I have, Julie? No. I have time, right?
Yes,
Okay.
yes.
So there are multiple layers, right? So number one, the only person that you have to be consistent for is you. That's the ancestral promise. That's your promise, is just to be consistent for you. The other part is that we can give someone a game, but it's not their game. And so until it becomes their game, they will never have consistency, because it's our game that we're gifting them. And so when we're working with people, when my students come in, I'm often like, no, that's what you would want that person to do. That's not what that person wants to do. And those two things have to meet in order for there to be compliance. So even when my students are seeing like volunteer clients or stuff like that, I'm forever like, wonderful protocol, but you created this protocol, what you felt based on what this person needed. What you need to do is really understand if that person even needs that. And here's the thing about herbalism. Herbalism meets people where they are. So no one has to abandon anything in order to use herbs. And so many people will say to me, Karen, are you a Sabiite? And I was like, no, I'm a plantite. I'm not. Like, I don't reach into any ideology around what you have to give up in order for you to access something that's quite naturally your right.
Yeah.
Ancestral medicine is your right. So there really isn't anything that I would say, oh, you have to stop. After you start to take this medicine and you start to feel it in your body, there are a multiple of decisions that you're going to have to make for yourself.
Mm.
And that multiple decision could look like, I probably do need to give up drinking. Because you see, this plant energy is something different.
Mhm.
And that's what I talk about basically,
Mhm.
right? It's going to, within your body, you will feel how they're competing for your energy. And so at some point, you're gonna say one of these things have to go, right? And make that decision for yourself. And there's nothing that we can do to really like control whether someone is complying to a medicine or not. And so in my work, many times they'll say, well, what if a client doesn't come back? And in my mind, spirits like they're healed. That's why they're not back here.
Yeah.
So my job really is to be like, okay, so you don't need to come into my apothecary every week anymore because you're doing good.
Mhm. Mhm.
You're fine. Whatever is going on in your life works for you in this moment. And when it doesn't work for you, I'll see you. And then we'll figure out things from there. So the part about this medicine and this hands-on is we're stressing ourselves out about things that we really cannot control.
Mhm.
And so how other people respond or how other people's journey is as it's tied to wholeness is very, very different depending on the person. And my students know around detox how I feel about that word. Right? My first lesson in class number 1 in herbalism, I don't know if you remember Judy and I say, I will never ask you to do a detox. You have nothing to give.
Mhm.
We're asking deeply depleted people to give from a place of depletion when we think about detox. Detox. What does nourishment look like? What does it mean to pour into yourself versus giving something else away? So my apothecary is probably not a place where people are gonna come in and hear like, this is the detox regimen. You're gonna eat, I don't know what you're gonna get. A third of what you're doing, and I say to folks, I've seen some detox regimens before that I'm like, you can't do this over an extended period of time. It's not gonna work for your health.
Mhm.
And then, years later, then you hear like, oh, we actually need collagen, we actually need stuff for our bones, we actually need fat for our brain, we actually need and I'm like, yeah, like all of these things coming up. So it's like, what does it look like to pour into yourself for a 15-day period of nourishment versus a 15-day period of detox? And some people have never had 15 days or extended period of nourishment. And when they do, and I say to them, if you trust me, then we'll do 15 days of nourishment. And after that, or 30 days of nourishment. And then after that, you come back to me and tell me if you think you still need a detox. Never once has anyone come back to me and say, yeah, I need that detox. When they do come back and say, can I have some more of those teas that you gave me for nourishment? Because my body has never felt like this before. Or my mind has never felt like this before. So we're coming from a place of deep depletion, and then we're like, maybe I should take something away, because that's what we've been colonized to do.
I love that.
Yes.
I know for me, it's balance. So especially with activism and organizing, or especially in this political context, you can get so much to it. But it's like, we still gotta work, we still gotta have time for fun, rest, taking care of ourselves, being with our people. So I know for me, I am trying to get better at having that balance. It's not perfect. Like there are some things that are gonna fall to the side sometimes, but having that balance where it's just like, yeah, like you said, like burnout happens, or you feel like you're giving away your fire to so many things and not nourishing and giving back to yourself. So that is part one, nourishing, but it's like to maintain that balance of being a whole person. Yeah.
Yeah, I've given up on balance. I think there's such a need for like us to think about like what's harmonious in different times of our life. Like we live in cycles and there are gonna be cycles that there's more to do than other cycles, right? So like if we get hung up on this word balance, oftentimes we can feel like we're chasing balance. But I'm like, what's harmonious in my life now? Like how can I bring more harmony into my life? It's kind of the way that I hold myself accountable to harmony, like instead of like what feels balanced in this moment. I want to add something about what you asked earlier, and I also think what herbalism, being herbalist, I love that there's so many aspects of plant medicine. So sometimes people struggle around compliance, right? Because when we're really tired, it's hard to get up and make a decoction, which is like boiling the herb, right? Like that could be hard to do. So if you're finding that it's harder to take a tea on some days, maybe we use tincture.
Thank you.
Right? So maybe we, if we're noticing that our family struggles around maybe making a tea every day, what we do is like, where does herbalism need to meet this person? And in that way, it could be a tea bag that we use, right? Like we can bag the tea, or maybe it's a tincture that person can use. I know when we travel often, we take mostly tinctures and some like tea bags with us because we still want to maintain the use of plants and plant medicine, but at the same time, it needs to be easy. Right? It is so in order for that to happen. So also think about that with yourself. Like in those moments where you're feeling like I'm maybe out of balance or feeling kind of out of balance, maybe it's the medicine, maybe it's what you've been approaching the medicine with, and you could like simplify a protocol, simplify how you want to take that, like break it down to some smaller things. 3 tinctures a day is all I have the energy right now to do. You're still engaging with the plant.
My question.
Not yet, no.
Can I ask? Okay. Hello. Hi. Something that I see a lot of activists mixes is conflict between each other and ourselves. I think a lot of activists want to do the right thing. So I think that it's like there's like the journey of becoming more right. And I think sometimes people turn right into conflict with each other.
Yeah. It can. I mean, I would say that I'm growing in understanding that conflict isn't a bad thing. And I'm growing in also understanding that, like a plant, 2 plants can be growing next to each other, and 1 plant can truly take over.
Yeah.
Right, and the other plant completely eases off or dies back, and the other one takes over. And so I'm also understanding that certain things just has its way. And there's a time for everything under the sun. But what I do want to say, I want to lean into like what can be gained from the conflict. And I'm speaking about in all ways. I'm not speaking just for like what you've asked, but what can be gained, right? Like, so maybe it's more morning glory flowers. Maybe it's finding a way, because that's what invasive plants really are, right? Invasives, right? And there's this beautiful herbalism book that talk about the medicine of invasive, right? And how those invasive medicines, like those invasive plants actually grow in response to like what's going on, right? So like, as this invasive comes in and takes over the stuff, that plant is actually tuned in and listening to something else that we're not even tuned into. Like, why is it growing so prolifically? And I think in conflict, oftentimes it's like that happens when someone sees something that you don't, and they're responding to it as an invasive plant does. Like, I have got to like take control of this thing because so I guess it's like seeing, what does it take to see what that person see that you don't see? What level of humility does it take for that to happen? And I think in conflict, the thing that comes up mostly for me is nervous system. Because the conflict feels like something I can't handle or something bad because my nervous system is dysregulated in the moment. So it feels like, oh, I gotta protect myself. This is really crazy. Anything that comes out of your mouth feels crazy that you're saying. So activists need to protect their nervous system in multiple ways. And I'm also, so protect your nervous system, take care, nourish your nervous system. But there's also this thing about protection that I'm hearing in that too, right? So as an herbalist, I have an entire chapter in this book about protection because I felt like it was so necessary to do the work that we're doing. And what does protection really, protection is work, right? The work of protection is really big. So if you feel protected and if your nervous system feels sure, you're more likely to see where that person is coming from because you're more likely to work the conflict through instead of like walking away from it, disconnecting, being like, no way, this is happening. We just can't see what each other is saying. Like if our nervous system is able to be like, I can quiet myself to this place where everything isn't spinning, or this is not triggering me in some way because I haven't done the work around my triggers, right? So this isn't triggering me in a way that is causing me to respond in this way because it's me and my nervous system. This is all about me and my nervous system and not so much about what's going on in your mouth. So herbs, I love oat straw for nervous system support. I talk about oat straw oftentimes for nervous system support because it builds resilience. It builds a more resilient nervous system. And when you have a resilient nervous system, you are not as shaken or as jumpy. Oat straw takes away that jumpy feeling, that reactive feeling that we can have oftentimes. And the work of protection, I talk about astragalus being like a really great plan for the work of protection, like creating that energetic shield around your body. And that's a beautiful thing to have, right? Many people sometimes say, like, I can see your aura, right? When this energetic shield is strong, that aura is actually reflected to other people. But creating that energetic shield around you really shields you from the energy of others. So other people's dysregulated nervous system will not impact you as much because that shield is around your body and that protects you often. So we'll stress brilliant. Yes.
So many of us are moving into the craft of healing, herbalism while on a journey of healing ourselves. Sometimes that gets a little dicey. So how do we support our practice while utilizing our energy medicine to help to continue healing ourselves and our community?
So as an herbalist, how do you utilize the medicine that you have for yourself?
So while we're going into the healing practice, spiritual herbalism or Reiki or massage therapy or whatever that modality is, how do we balance healing ourselves along that journey? A lot of us are still healing ourselves too, and balancing that energy with the community and ourselves.
Yeah, I mean, if we waited for healers to be healed before they could do healing work, it'll never happen. We're always healing alongside whoever we're working with. And we're doing a lot of client work now with Julie's class we just finished. And one of the things that comes up in that, I say to you, like every person that you meet on your way in this healing journey that we may call a client is actually a gift, right? That gift is a reminder of exactly what you need to work on. And that's why we draw the people to us that we draw. Because someone is going to come to you that's not going to come to the next person next to you. And they come to you because they see something in you. And oftentimes what they see in you is the one that you just have. It's all over your face. You wear it in your spirit. Like, I just walked through this and I gained some wisdom. So now I'm able to help you. And we're doing this together. And so oftentimes I say to people, when you're working with clients, make the medicine for you too. Like both of y'all are gonna be like it's for both of you. Like if I'm giving you a rose tincture, I'm taking the rose tincture. Like we both are doing. Yeah. Yes.
Hi, Empress Karen and getting yourself into the faces in here. My name is Shavana. I go by job. I do a lot of work around
destigmatizing weeds and invasive plants, so I'm really happy that you brought that up. And the perspective of what is the plant seeing that we're not is something I'm definitely gonna carry with me forward. I love that. My question is, I do a lot of programming around immune system health building, plant medicine workshops, nature walks, and a lot of that is around immunity, grief, processing emotions, sleep, like you said, stress relief. In addition to that, I'm curious as to how we can use plant allies to enhance joy and contentment, and kind of going back into that nourishment conversation versus detox. And I'm just kind of curious as to what you have to say about plant medicine that helps to enhance like joy and bliss, and how we can cultivate those sort of spaces as well. In addition to the immunity boosting herbs, in addition to the protective herbs, in addition to the grief working herbs as well.
Yeah, I'm glad we talked about that because it seems, oftentimes we get into the ancestral conversation and we think about the trauma, but we don't think about the joy that we're gifted or the resilience that's also pulsing through our veins that they've given us, right? But plant medicine for joy, I do a lot with like the color of a plant, like doctrine of signatures, how the plant looks, how it grows. And when we think of joy, what colors do you think of? And yellow plants are beautiful for joy, right? Chamomile, lovely for joy, right? It's when we call it the baby plant, right? Calendula, it's the sun. It's like an antidepressant, right? And it's used in the body that way. It's like connect you to the sun. But I also think of reds. I also think of the beautiful color of a rose, right? I think of like how you can just fall in love just by being with a rose. Like it connects to your heart and the vibration of the heart, and how that can open up a space to feel really beautiful and sensual, and the softness of the petals. So a lot of flower plants are oftentimes when I go to for joy in different ways. I also like the joy of peace. Right, like whether it's not like peace is joyful. How about that?
Yeah.
You feel, the more joy you feel, right? So think about like white flower plants and the level of peace they bring in your life, and how you can be deeply connected to that joy of that, the white of the flower. I lean into that. Like as the colors make me joyful, those are the plants that I want to incorporate as peace.
We do have.
Hi, guys. Sorry to be the one to have to do this, but we have to honor Karen's time, and we still want to have time for book signing, so we have to close the Q&A now. I'm so excited by this whole experience, and one of the first things I learned in Karen's course was about how important nourishment is. And my prayer and my intention as I was doing my piece of putting this together was just to make sure that everybody could leave feeling nourished. And I'd like to know, did that happen? Yes. Yeah. So let's just give a round of applause. But thank you so much. And
I think the best way to get in touch with us is through Sacred Vibes Healing, our website, which talks about like everything that we're doing all summer and all the ways that you can reach out to us. Yeah. No, you talk about it. So, okay, so one of the ways, our annual herbalism conference is in October, and the topic around this year's herbalism conference is ancestral intelligence. A play on AI, that's really great, and that will be in October from the 4th to the 5th. 4th to the 6th, we begin with the Black Herbalist Convergence, and then after that, which everyone is, even if you're not a practicing herbalist, but you have a vision that you'd like to be, is invited to that. But the conference itself is both virtual and in person in Brooklyn, so we're really looking forward to it.
Yay. Thank you.